My name is Paula Este, and I am the Executive Director of the PEG Center for Art and Activism, and I'm probably going to cry more than once this evening, because to look out and see all of you, many of whom I don't know, a lot of who I do know, here to address this as a community, racism, where we go from here, diversity in our community, brings me to tears, because it's been a lot of work to get here. We wouldn't be here without you, and we're so appreciative of your time on hard subjects, so thank you. The PEG Center is a small nonprofit in Newburyport, Massachusetts, that through art, creativity, professional activists, scientists, writers, we try to bring you subjects in the area of social justice, human rights, and climate justice, so that you can decide on your own what's important to you and where you want to work and how you want to help and affect change. In January, I started to sit down with Amanda Bradbury, Ann Upton, two of the shining stars, in my opinion, of the YWCA Newburyport staff, and with Eddie Carson, many of us know him as an upstart, a fire starter, a loud and boisterous voice for equality. We started to talk about racism, and we all wanted to know what we could do in this white community of ours. And we started to hatch a plan that, A, we didn't know anything, B, we don't know how to get where we hope to go, and C, we needed our community to help us get there. And so we launched a series of 4, this is the final one, events to open the door, to start writing the script and reading the book. The first one was a lecture on March 5th by Eddie called Being Black in White Spaces. That was really an eye-opener for many of us, and we followed it up very quickly on March 21st. Eddie led this, with a fishbowl conversation with 6 BIPOC people, telling us, describing to this community what it's like to live and work and be here as a person of color. And for those of you who were there, how many of us were there on that? It moved us. It had to have moved us, because we love our community. We do the right thing, and yet a lot of times it isn't being done out of ignorance, unskillfulness, and so we want to become more skilled. And you know, today I was thinking, I always say that Newburyport is a white community, like, too bad for us. And you know, the fact of the matter is that we are not a white community. We have people of color living here, and how we choose to live with them is why we're here tonight, because there are better ways of living together. There are better ways of amplifying people of color in our community so that we can lean into what we really want, which is diversity. I want to open my door on 3 Pine Street and see people of color on my street. Oh my God, is that a possibility? Maybe through the complex issues of how we become more diverse. I don't know the answers. I know economics and housing and every other darn thing is part of this. But let's start, and it is being started in many, many areas. Fires are starting in our community. We just want to keep the bonfire going tonight. So, thank you. So, Eddie Carson, yeah. Tonight we want to talk, and we want to listen, and we want to cull out our common ground, our common desires, and common goals and commitments. We're going to begin to develop an anti-racist pledge, but I really want to say that the pledge is not the important part of what we're doing tonight. We're going to sit together in groups, we're going to put our ideas down together, and then we're going to come back as a whole group and see what's common. Yes, we could create a pledge from that, and we'll march it down to City Hall, but that's not why we're here. We're here for the long haul, the true change, the systems that need our assistance. And tonight's just a beginning, so here we go. So my personal pledge is that I am no longer going to call my community white. I have seen our diversity, I have seen our possibilities and our problems, so I pledge to work to eradicate those challenges in my own thoughts in my consciousness, in my work, and in my home. So I'm asking you to join us. Tonight we represent our schools, our city, families, other nonprofits, and colleagues are here. I'm thrilled to have you. And so let's begin. My heartfelt gratitude goes out to Julie Cook, to Amanda Bradbury, Ann Hupton, and Eddie Carson. Let's give them a hand. I feel like the Peg Center has formed a collaboration with the YWCA and with Eddie that I hope to last a lifetime. Thank you to the boards of both of our organizations for your support and encouragement in following what we really feel like we need to do as activists in this community. Thank you to all of our donors, our patrons, and sponsors. It's all because of you that we can continue this work. So Eddie is going to come up now and talk about what tonight is going to bring. Amanda will then follow with just a quiet, contemplative reading of the questions that will then take into our breakout sessions. You have your table numbered, so thank you so much.
Folks, I appreciate all the number of bodies that are in this space tonight and everything as we kind of lean into anti-racism and community work. Let me just say a few things, and I don't want to talk too long because I have spoken a bit over a period of time, and we're gathered here to work. I mean, we're going to work, and we're going to lean in to what I call that really good funk of work, and we're going to come across in ways in which we're going to really put things together that's going to launch Newburyport forward in a way where we're going to get other spaces and other communities to seek to emulate that as well. I am going to tell you, creating anti-racist pledges are not easy whatsoever, right? We can have a private conversation in spaces I've worked at and I've been at, and I've tried to create pledges to say that we are anti-racist and we're going to drive this and we're going to create changes in communities. I've been in spaces where folks have said, we here at such and such place, we're an anti-racist school until it's time to be anti-racist, and they don't want to show up. They crawl back into a hole because they're white and they're privileged and they're afraid. Because what does this mean if I embolden and I empower other folks who are really willing to commit to the work of anti-racism? I'm just here to tell you, what we're going to do tonight is hard work, challenging work. Many of you who may not share my identity may feel a bit uncomfortable, and I ask that you lean in, and that's okay if you're uncomfortable. It's okay if you challenge one another in these conversations, in these spaces, in order for us to get the most out of our time tonight. Because see, I don't want us to commit and be like other places and institutions that say we're anti-racist and not willing to do the work of anti-racism. And that's what it boils down to. I want to touch on 4 overarching points briefly as we kind of make our way into this narrative in terms of what's taking place here. If you look at your sheet, the first one here, right? And I just want to make sure we're clear in terms of what's transpiring. You know, the first point here is we want to realize the meanings behind privilege, racism, and whiteness. And it's really important for us to understand the realities that whiteness carries privilege with them. And the fact that whiteness does carry a level of privilege, there's benefit in terms of how white people step forward and manifest and seek to change communities in order to bring about the kind of anti-racist work in order to push back on structural and systemic racist policies that are there. And then these things are there in ways in which folks don't even realize that they do exist. That is what privilege does. Privilege is recognizing the fact that many of you, and I'm sorry for making a generalization, folks, but that's what I do. Wake up every morning and the last thing you think about and the last thing that you do is say, well, I'm white. I teach my classes every day, and I get in those spaces, and I'm reminded I'm black. I walk into my board meetings. I go see my boss. I hang out with my colleagues all the time, and there's nothing but a sea of whiteness. So much whiteness that they don't even realize there's a problem that exists even at the places I'm employed and work at, in the communities I live in, right? That's not anti-racism work, because now I've been deduced to a positionality of invisibility. That is what privilege is. Many of you hold that privilege in this space. And some of us have a lot of double privilege that exists here too. cis, straight, white men in a room, right? I'm happy to see so many cis, white men in a room, because y'all have more power than anyone else in all these spaces. I appreciate you being here. Thank you, more than anything else. It's important that we understand that. It is important that we understand, no matter what the counter narrative seems to be, that Brother Carson cannot walk into a space, or with the demographic population in this country or within this community, cannot contribute nor commit to acts of racism. I can dislike someone. You can be prejudiced all I want. You can be prejudiced against that awesome soul sister Paula back there. But what does that mean? I have no real power, no real dynamic that's there. I'm not a part of the cog that create these structural systems that exist. This is the thing that makes white people uncomfortable in doing anti-racist work, especially white anti-racist work, and that is understanding the fact that a brother like me cannot engage nor commit acts of racism. Not in this country. And if that makes you uncomfortable, that's okay. Let's keep talking about why that discomfort exists there too. So that's the first thing we've got to get, we've got to grasp. The second thing we've got to continue to keep in mind is we got to look within each other, ourselves, before looking outward. So that means we have to do kind of a system check and evaluation. We're having these conversations here. You're going to continue to go home. You're going to engage in some of the work, hopefully, that we're starting to do within your spaces and your communities. And you're going to have to check yourself, and you're going to have to ask yourself about your own internal biases, your explicit biases that exist. Those things where you hear that little noise in your head, and when you're wrestling with that just for a second, that thought, why am I doing this? Because I don't have to do this. And because you don't have to do this means that you sit back and you do nothing. And there are a lot of folks who are doing nothing. A lot of folks who are doing nothing. Check yourself. But I'm inviting you into the space to do that because I appreciate you being here. Because it's hard work. I am not here to sugarcoat this for you folks, right? Am I mad? Am I upset? You have no idea. I've been like this for a long time. People stepping up and telling me how pro-black and how anti-racist they are, until you start seeing the levels of racism creeping out the back of their skull, and they can't even see it, even in ways that are not as egregious as they think those things exist, and those things do exist in these spaces. The third thing is we have to look outward and discover the historical effects of racism and other forms of oppression by learning and growing as an anti-racist. You heard about the Kansas City chief kicker today?
Oh my God.
I'm still shell-shocked over that. I may need another week, and I don't know why I'm shocked nor surprised to hear that. Hey, you know what? At least the brother was honest, right? Not hiding and pretending to be some pro-white liberal and all this stuff. He's just admitting to what he is, and we know those things exist. But anti-racism, pro-queer folks, pro-black, brown, Asian folks, pro-BIPOC folks, pro-women. Anti-racism is about engaging in acts even beyond just the color line that exists. The last thing, simply understanding and acknowledging the issues is not enough. I've read all the books, Eddie. I've watched the news. I've come to all these events. I understand. I think I got it. Good. Showing up is part of it, because, boy, I can create a list of folks who never show up. And I can do that. I have no problem doing that. We must take action. Recognize the need to actively engage with the system and the community and commit to making a difference. And it's that last part that we're going to lean into the most tonight, the action-oriented task. What we're going to see here is we're going to see levels of conversations that are going to take place. There are categories on your sheet. And those categories, activism 1, civic and business practices 2, schools and education 3, that are there. I want you to pay attention, and my friend and colleague Amanda say more about that. The other thing I want you to be attuned to as we launch into the work that we're going to do tonight within these different groups based off those numbers you have is that you're going to sit around and you're going to spend a lot of time talking to each other, having conversations that are centered around these questions. And as you navigate through, the person who's facilitating that space, that table where you're at, they'll take some notes. They'll guide you through the processes of what's taking place through these discussions, kind of move things along, then take that information from the conversation and then challenge each one of you to think about what are some of the tasks that are needed in order to make Newburyport an anti-racist community. What are some of the things that are going to be necessary and needed in order to create that pledge that we're going to ask all leaders and business folks and all those people who need to, right? I mean, last time I checked, Newburyport hadn't hired a person like me to make sure that teachers are engaged and leaning into the kind of anti-racist work that they need to. Oh, speaking of that, I meant to tell you. So I am leaving the Governor's Academy. I'm out this year. I will not be returning, but that doesn't mean that I won't continue to do the anti-racist work that I've started. Here's time for me to move on. But you want my contact information, right? Paul will be happy to give that to you in the future, but I'll still be around because we got a lot of work to do. We're just getting started. And as I told my new boss, I hope you're ready for me. Because you know, I've been working with you for about 1.5 years, and you know how I am, and you know I get fired up, and I don't have a filter, and I'm going to say this about that sister I'm going to go work for. She told me, Eddie, you just need to stay and do what you need to do, and I'm going to sit back and I'm going to listen. Complete confidence stepping into that space. I said, all right, you sure? Better get ready. That's what we got, and that's what y'all are going to do here. Amanda.
All right, it's a tough act to follow. Luckily, I don't have to speak. I just get to give you guys all your marching orders as we move you off into these sessions. So as Eddie was explaining to you, before, we divided the room into 3 groups. This is to create some balance and hopefully very effective conversations. You were given a number at the beginning when you walked in, and those numbers coincide with the signs that you can see on each of the tables. So you'll be able to tell if you've been put into the group with the activism, into the group with civic and business practices, or into schools and education. If for some reason you feel that the group that we've placed you in isn't where you would be most effective, we encourage you to move where you think you should go. But please try to use those numbers. We did that on purpose, and we're hoping that it'll help the conversations along. And then lastly, before we send you off, I'd like you all to just take a moment and to be able to calm yourself, be very, very open to the process, and I'm going to read for you some prompts that we would like you to kind of sit with as you move off into these groups. How can we address biases and prejudices within ourselves and our community to become more effective anti-racist activists? What concrete actions can we take to advocate for policy changes that promote racial equity and justice? What are some strategies for engaging with people who may not yet understand or support anti-racist activism? How can we foster productive dialogue with them? How can we actively listen to and amplify the voices of marginalized communities within our activism? And now we're going to have everybody go ahead and check your numbers, and if you can, Paula wants you all to know that you have 20 minutes in the breakout session.
Each leader from the group will sort of report in. We didn't come up with a pledge. Did any group come up with it? No. It's not time. It is definitely not time for a pledge. So, as the spokesperson for the activism section, there were so many ideas. What was really good about what we talked about is that we started out with wanting ideas and actions to do, things that we could do right now in our community to sort of prove or show that we are anti-racist, that we are diverse and equitable. And then, because of the honesty of our conversations, we realized you don't start there, you start here. And then you have to really be honest with yourself about, like, I don't know what to do except to keep talking to you and to keep showing up at the things that matter, like Jordy Vining's unveiling at the cemetery of Black unknown graves, yes, and the Housing Coalition. And you would like a moment. So you know what, let's do you after we check in with our groups, how's that? So I guess the bottom line for us is we want to stay together, we want to keep working together, we don't know what's next, but we have an idea that exposing ourselves, that showing up, that getting uncomfortable and persisting are going to get us much further than imposing our ideas on a system. So, in other words, for example, the Brown School, show up at the meetings. For example, wanting a DEI full-time employee at City Hall, guess what? Show up at the mayor's office over and over again, plug it, plug it, plug it. So small things we came up with, but really just to continue the conversation. So I'm gonna give it to Amanda and Ann.
Theaters together, so.
We've got a lot.
I know.
We'll try to be brief if we can.
Same as Paula, though. Definitely did not come to the place where we have a pledge. We had way more questions, I think, than we even originally started with.
A lot of discussion of curriculum in the public school system, which I think we could not answer to our city council people. Were able to answer a little bit about that. Sarah Hall, thank you for helping us with that. But some of the questions were just how is activism being supported by our kids in school?
And I think one of the things that came out of ours, which none of the rest of you actually had the same experience, is that we had the pleasure of having a child that was in our group with us, who actually was brave enough to talk about experiences of racism that are being experienced on a daily basis in the school that we're all having this meeting in, and what that feels like and looks like. So that was huge to hear that, to hear the types of questions and things. Thank you, Annabella. We appreciate you. Yeah, I think all of the chicken scratch, and I didn't write it, so I'm trying to do my best to read it.
Well, why don't I read some of the questions and then we can elaborate quickly because I know we have a lot to get to. Number one,
is that a handheld mic? Because if you're looking that way and reading, some of us can't. Just hold the mic. Can you hold the mic? Just hold the mic.
our number one was, what does it mean to be of color, and are we addressing that in our schools? I'm just going to read all of them. Number two was, how do we review curriculum around racism? 3, the teachers need training. We can't assume that they don't have biases. 4, younger generations don't care. Differences of races, it's important to make them care, differentiate. Yeah, do you want to read it? We had an incredible note taker from the City Council.
Writing as quickly as she
Sorry,
could to
everyone.
help
Yes,
us
I
out.
was writing as quickly as humanly possible. So it is hard to sort of understand all of it. Curriculum starts at the top. So I think the discussion there was really about the fact that, you know, the superintendent is really the person who is setting curriculum, and that we need to look at other schools, what other schools are doing, and make sure that we're doing everything we can be in our own school community. And it's important that our kids learn from strong Black leaders. It was certainly made comment that we don't have a lot of people of color in our community, and it's really important that we get kids from our community in front of strong Black leaders. The importance of teaching our children to be activists, that children these days really aren't energized around activism and the importance of really doing that. I believe Sarah Hall from school committee talked to the fact that the challenges of the rigidity of curriculum, because it's really sent down from the state level, and there really isn't a lot of ability to really change what we do in terms of curriculum, and that I think that's good enough for that one. The importance of reflecting on our own biases on a regular basis, that we have our own biases and we need to just constantly reflect on that. There was some discussion, well, we had a 90% retired teacher in our group, and she talked about, you know, sort of the fear of talking out and going off curriculum on a regular basis, and why she feels that way and how to address that better. Also, what safety nets exist for children when they do encounter racism in the school, well, racism as a whole, but in particular when they're feeling that from people of leadership in the schools each day, and how do we find that? Yeah, and getting back to the curriculum piece again, so again, school committee member Sarah Hall talked about that we need to work harder to develop appropriate curriculum, and that there is culturally based teaching, otherwise known as CRT. Evidently there are resources online to really understand that better. But it was later brought up that there are people in our community that are fighting against this kind of curriculum, and you know, may not even be happy that we're here tonight having this conversation. And how do we engage those people better so that we are getting that breadth of, you know, opinion, but also hopefully really changing those sorts of minds and opinions as well. Let me just see if I didn't. One thing, at least that my own bias, and I will give it up, that I thought was one of the most important things that really came out of our group is what do we have to do to be able to create a affinity group for kids of color and just kids of difference in general in our schools, that doesn't exist today. And I think that's something, at least for me in the group, that I came away with as a very actionable item, and seems like something that should be relatively easy to do. So
How are we supporting their voices?
And a group for parents for the same.
Group for
Parents
parents
for the
and how are
same.
we supporting our kids' voices, most importantly, in education and otherwise in our community?
A lot.
Thank you, it's a lot.
Quickly, I won't be able to cover everything, but just kind of give you the Reader's Digest version. We leaned in and we thought about business practice and civic practices in the community, and some of the things that we came up with, of course, is really holding the Chamber of Commerce accountable with action items in terms of what are they doing to try to recruit and retain BIPOC businesses and organizations within the community, and really creating an action plan and living up to that. Moving forward, of course, other things too, in terms of what are businesses doing to support BIPOC employees, making this feel like a place where belonging actually exists in actuality. Even things such as those who are still going through language transition, maybe with the English language, for example, and that type of work, and that connects quite well with education. One of the other things we talked about too was, what does it look like to create tax incentives and breaks in order to bring in BIPOC folks living here? And I know probably some other groups here talked about housing, and what does that look like, right? And so all of those things come together. Last thing I'll say briefly is, which, and I think there's been some work on this, so I may be speaking out of turn. You know, in terms of city marshals, police departments, in terms of transparency, their own DEI practices and cultural competency and all of that, what does that look like in terms of what they're doing? And what does it look like in terms of the type of culture they're bringing about within those spaces too? So I'm gonna pause there and give up the mic. A lot more things, but things that I believe can happen in actuality. Here we go. You got it.
So in order to create a more diverse community, I think we need to have more diverse housing. Our housing policies are racist, discriminatory, and exclusionary. in all of our communities. So the reason that, so what we need to do is advocate for policies that allow people of different backgrounds, different races, different income levels to live in our communities. Right now, we don't allow them to live here. We don't allow multifamily housing in our communities. We have very, very little of it. And so my name is Judy Timon. I'm the coordinator for the Greater Newburyport YWCA Housing Choice Coalition. So this is another program that's part of the YWCA, and we are currently working. We meet once a month. We have education. We have activists who are out there trying to change that, trying to pass the MBTA zoning in all of our communities, to pass ADU zoning, to create more housing so that we can have a more diverse community. So I've got some information here. If you want to do something, if you want to be active, please, please join us and work with us.
So, there's a lot to be done. We really culled a lot of information tonight. I hope you feel heard, because we want that to be the structure and the foundation going forward. So, the team stays together. We're gonna cull all the information. We're gonna send you stuff, and so same time soon. Thank you so very much for coming.
Hey, hold on to the handouts with the questions and stuff, okay? You can recycle it, but I'd like you to take it with you and keep pondering it in your mind as you move forward. Thank you, folks. I hope you'll email me.